So, I mean, I think because evolution is driven by natural and artificial selection,
Right.
that there's these outside agents, whether it's the environment or other people or animals,
Yep.
that limit certain characteristics of animals. And so if I have, for instance, only one leg and I'm born, with in the wild, I have a less likely chance to reproduce.
Right.
And so less people will be born with just one leg. We'll have two because it helps us. But one problem is in modern society, we've advanced so far beyond the natural environment that we were evolved in.
Right.
There's less of those environmental factors that kill. I mean, there's still some.
Certainly.
Right.
So what if that's not a feature, if not a bug, but a feature? All right.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, welcome to Reasonably Spontaneous Conversation I'm having here with Tarek Zaher. And I want to make sure that we have a little bit of background.
Sure.
Here,
Yeah.
okay? Because I want to continue this conversation on evolution and see where we're going. One of the reasons why I wanted to ask you on the show is because I relate very much to your story.
Thank you.
I was born in Mexico. Even though you were born in the United States, you went to Egypt when you were young, and you have an Egyptian father and an American mother. I had a Mexican father and an American mother, so we both had that experience.
Yeah.
So you are 20 years old. This is you were born in 98, right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. When did you go over to Egypt, and do you have any memories and the sense of what that entire land, this Fertile Crescent, the place where, very close to where humanity actually arose?
I moved there when I was a baby, and I only lived there for a few years. There's pictures of me that I like crawled in a snake hole by the pyramids, and I liked rice pudding there, and I still love rice pudding.
Yeah.
But I don't remember any particular memories because I had infantile amnesia.
Right.
At the time, my brothers remember some things. My mom said that she liked to drive me through the Egyptian and talk to me about her. She liked reading physics books and poetry books, and so she would just as a baby she just wanted someone to talk to, and I don't remember that. But
does your curiosity stem from your mother's deep curiosity? Do you connect with it through there?
I mean, I would hate to admit it because it's always frustrating to say that your parents did something because it doesn't feel like yours. But I mean, I think I would have to give her some credit of that because she always loved reading. She's always had books in the house. And so ever since I was little, at my brother's basketball games or wherever, I would just be reading a book. And I independently do it now because I just like to do it. It's a thing that brings me pleasure. But I'm sure there's some connection to her passion for that as well that inspired me in the first place to do
Did
that.
you start writing because you're a columnist at the University of Texas at the Longhorn paper? I also did that when I was at the University of Houston.
Yeah.
I was a columnist, and so what did you get into writing early?
I did. I remember I would write just for fun. Like when I read a book, I would write sort of a summary of it. I remember, and I would hide them. I was embarrassed about them. I remember one time I was little, I read a biography of Isaac Newton, and I wrote, these poetic things of how great he was, and I hid it under my bed. But I always liked it because it's just a process of thinking. I think writing is equivalent to thinking, except you're forced to make conceptual sense when you do it, because when you're thinking in your mind, you're allowed to skip between points and accept presuppositions that maybe shouldn't be accepted. But when you're writing and you see it on the page, you're forced to really think carefully about it, and it helps when you're talking to other people, such as now, when you've written about ideas, because you know how to articulate it better, and you've thought through all of the different contingencies that you usually hit, those road bumps. And
did you always know that you had a very high processor, that you thought about things that your peers did not think about, that you began to expand in that? And I'm not talking about in a hierarchical scale, because we can talk about intelligence, and we can talk, but certainly about curiosity and about the depth of because astrophysics was something that you were like, where did all this come from?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was initially started by my mom and those things, but I remember, like, when I was little, I loved homework. Like, I would take it with me at home. I would ask for more. in kindergarten, they moved me up a grade or whatever.
Yeah.
But kindergarten, you don't really do it. You just color. So maybe I
Sure.
just colored well, but they.
Look at that. He colors
Exactly.
so well
In the
within the line. Yeah.
Exactly. But I mean, I always enjoyed those types of things. Whereas to my classmates, I don't think it's their fault. I think they might have. People have bad teachers, especially with regards to math and other subjects, where the teachers, I think you have to be almost a bad teacher to inspire students to hate those subjects like math and physics, because when you really confront them, they're the most interesting things, I think, that are possible in the world. Like, and so I have a thought experiment if you want to know.
I would love one, but I want to bring the audience in, that if you're listening to this, and especially if you're listening to it on speakers and you hear something in the background, in the main studio back over here at Austin Public Access, they're having some, is that heavy metal?
I think it's just rock.
Just rock. They're rocking out. So just, all right, we're having out. Now, now back to our thought experiment.
Yeah. So I thought of this when I was little, and this is how I always felt since I was little. Right. I don't know the word to describe it, but I know a situation I can describe to make you feel how I feel. Please. Okay, so you can close your eyes if you want, and imagine that the chair you're sitting in now, slowly as we're talking, begins to vibrate and rumble, and you don't know what's happening, and it suddenly gets more and more intense as we go on, and I stop speaking, and I look at you, and I look to the camera and aghast, and you start slowly rising up into the air, and the chair that you're sitting in is forming into this cartoonish monster, and the mouth happens to form exactly where you're sitting, and you fall through it, right? And you don't get chewed, and I try to reach for you, but the mouth closes, and you're in darkness, and you're sliding down a slimy esophagus, and you see a tiny pinprick of light down at the bottom, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And as it gets bigger and bigger, eventually you slide right through it onto the sidewalk of a bustling city corner street. And there's skyscrapers, and there's these weird aliens in business suits and tuxedos and have their briefcases, and they're going to their respective jobs. And in that moment, right, do you think to yourself, well, I guess I got to go get a job, and you go and clean and buy a suit? Or do you say, what is going on? Where am I? What is this place? Who are these people? And I think that we're in the exact same situation right now, except instead of a monster's esophagus, it was your mom's birth canal, as awkward as that is. And because you had infantile amnesia, you didn't initially ask those questions, but there's no reason, there's no more information we were given to those answers that should make us complacent in finding them, because we don't know where we are, we don't know what these things are. And so the idea of just saying, well, what's the use of physics or math or any of these subjects in school that ask these fundamental questions? Well, to me, it's like the only logical thing to do, because we're in that situation, is to ask those questions, because anyone in that situation would do exactly that. And so that's how I've always felt with regard to physics and also philosophy and everything like that, is that it's not just a niche thing that some people like and it's not really practical or anything.
Sure.
To me, it's the only rational thing to do given our present circumstance and condition that all of us are in.
Well, I agree that it's the only rational.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk, but rational and emotional as we're bringing ourselves along, because I know that I am growing. I have emotional intelligence.
Yes, right.
And I have my IQ and I have my EQ, and I also have what I'm studying through Cindy Wigglesworth and others is SQ, which is spiritual intelligence, which is purpose.
Absolutely.
How do we grow our purpose so that we know, why am I here?
Yeah.
What do you have a sense? I mean, you and I both have read Coelho's The Alchemist.
Oh yes. Yeah.
And that's where he's searching for. That's where Santiago is on the journey. You know, he's searching for his personal legend.
Right.
Have you? Where are you on that journey?
I mean, usually people see. You mentioned the intelligence, emotional intelligence. They usually see the emotional intelligence and the purpose that you mentioned as in a friendship, and the rational and the purpose as in conflict.
Right.
Whereas I think they're all friends to each other. They all know.
They have got. There's got to be a Venn diagram where.
Exactly. And so by exploring rationally and emotionally, both your origins and your presuppositions in the form of both universal human nature and your own unique human nature that you're born with. By exploring that, I think that does give you a picture very much like The Alchemist, where everyone has their own personal legend that only they are capable of exceeding. Because your life is different from mine in 1,000 different ways, and so you know things that I will never possibly I don't even know what I don't know, and you have access to those, and every single person is unique in that way, where they have something to offer the world that only they as an individual can offer. And that couldn't be closer to, I think, what these spiritual stories point towards, that we all have our personal legends and destiny, and that it takes, a courage and perseverance to pursue them, but if you do, then it's a profound experience.
In every way. How do you overcome, I find myself, I'm wired optimistically.
Yeah.
That's just the way I'm wired. I wake up in the morning and I'm bright. It's just the way. Not everyone does that.
Oh yeah.
Not everyone does. How are you wired? What are your baselines?
I think I'm the same way. I think of it the same way. People, depression is not people's choice. They can't really. It's not their fault that they feel that way, and it's usually biological to some degree, out of their control. I feel the same way. And I almost feel guilty about it. But I just feel happy, and I don't. It's not because of anything I've done or that I've. Maybe it has some, some parts of it, but I just feel that way, and I can't help it. But, there are, road bumps in the.
Sure. So talk about overcoming something. I mean, because were you a nerdy kid? Did you have? I mean, you talked about having two older brothers, and having older brothers, that sit there and look like, what is this little guy doing here? And it's bad enough that there's two of us. What's this third guy doing here?
That's exactly how they were. They were jocks. They loved basketball. They taught me basketball. So I had the advantage. Thankfully, I think they taught me. If they weren't for them, I would have been completely, I wouldn't have built any muscles. I would have stayed in my room all day. But I was, I guess nerdy. I don't think that's a derogatory term anymore.
I don't think so at all. I mean, this is. But again, we're talking about both cultural stereotypes and who we are, and that is so just.
Right, and I mean, I was nerdy, and so is the question how did I overcome speed bumps related to that?
Talk about some of the speed bumps that bump that you're overcoming or being a part of, so that it relates to what others who don't have the blessing of optimism that we have, so that it's the same, because each of us has an opportunity to overcome.
Right. I mean, I think there's when you're confronted with the suffering of life that inevitably comes, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's, I think everyone experienced that, no matter what you are. There's two, unconsciously I've done it. Now I sort of know what I'm doing because I've read the theories of how it works, but I've taken a two-pronged approach where Western philosophy and civilization, usually when presented with these sufferings, delves into the self, right? Of what can I do to, despite the environmental things that I can't control, to make my life as best as it possibly can.
Right.
And so that's, I think, a good message for people to have, that, just do whatever you possibly can that's in your control, and, you have to ignore what you can't do, and that's the best that you can do.
Right.
But sometimes there's environmental conditions that are too hard, that are too much on the weight side for you. Whatever you can do will is never going to surpass that.
It's very. I look at some of the camps in Syria.
Yeah. Right.
I look at some of the refugee camps. I look at some of the people that come from up through Central America and who come with just and turn themselves in for. How can I? It's very difficult for me. I mean, I can understand on an intellectual level, but how do I empathize with that?
Empathize. Yeah, I mean, you can't tell a child who's been separated from his parent, who's 5 years old, well, just do what you can and just forget about everything. Right, like
slip up her lip,
just
young
get
man.
through it. Yeah, right.
You're good.
It's not going to work. It's going to scar them more.
Sure.
Right, and so that's where I think the second avenue that I pray in my two-pronged approach, which is usually associated with Eastern practices and philosophy,
Right.
where it goes the opposite direction. Instead of delving into the self and saying, what can I do? It goes, and it simply says, observe the suffering, right, that it causes, right? What does it feel like?
Yes.
And often just feeling it and disconnecting it from all these jumbles of thoughts that you attach it makes it less worse. For instance, they've done studies with people who have chronic back pain
Right.
and they've given them mindfulness meditation over a few weeks, and it drastically reduces the pain because they found most of the pain, and they've corroborated this by scanning their brains,
Right.
comes from the worry and anxiety that it's going to be like this forever, and I'm never going to feel, but once you calm down and you just notice the physical sensation of the pain,
Right.
it's not nearly as bad as the worry and anxiety make it be.
It exacerbates it to a degree
Right.
that it just sends it off the charts.
Exactly.
And so. Do you do mindfulness? Do you meditate? How did you get in that
Right.
route into it?
I mean, I've always been interested in religion and spiritual experiences of everyone across.
Right.
That's what, growing up Muslim in a Christian East Texas, you don't really belong to either world, right?
Yeah.
So you're from a third.
You are.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you have the Christian, everyone around you is Christian, but your parents say that you're Muslim, and so you have to sort of choose between them, or because you're being influenced from both sides, right?
Of course you are.
And so usually what happens is you accept your parents' religion, and everyone around you is that same religion, and you go your whole life. But when you're put in that situation, you have to choose, right? Like which parts of which thing are good and which parts of which thing are bad.
Right.
And you have to sort of
That
objectively
work for you or don't work for you,
Exactly.
rather than putting good, bad,
Right,
right? I mean,
exactly,
that work
right,
or not.
right.
Okay, so how did you do that?
So that
talk about
yeah.
that, because
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
very interested in how, like, for example, when I've studied Christianity, that there was a reformation, that
Yeah.
it went through, and we had
Right.
Martin Luther and went out there, and then now you have this Christianity that is by no means monolithic. I mean, my God, it's from the most fundamental all the way up to the mystical.
Right.
In the same way, in Islam, there's the Sufis and the Rumi and Hafiz and all the way, and then you have Sunni and Shia and all, as I understand it. Help me if I'm not. So,
Sure.
do you see an evolution happening in Islam?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, Christianity has been around longer than Islam. I think about 600 years between Jesus and Muhammad.
Yep.
And so Islam is younger. A lot of changes are happening in Islam right now, I think, especially with regard to how you interpret the scripture, right?
Yes.
In Christianity, the sort of because there's these bad things that we agree today are just morally bad, such as the things about homosexuality
Right.
and women. And there's several avenues in Christianity. You can say Jesus died, and so he died so that we don't have to personally persecute those people now because he died for their sins and etc.
Which I never totally, honest to God,
Right.
understood. I
No, yeah.
never cognitively.
Yeah.
Not saying that if there's anything
I'm
that
with
isn't
you.
a matter of
No,
fact,
yeah.
but I never got the law. I never
Right.
got it quite from a logical standpoint, and I hope that someone will explain it to me. But anyway, continue.
But it's for religious people, they want
Exactly,
something within
and
religion. Yeah,
I
just fine,
honor
yeah.
that. I honor
Right.
that. Yeah.
It's better than So, but in Islam today, there's a movement where it says that in a lot of the Quran, right? If you read it, and you study the Bedouin society, which is the pre-Islamic society, they were tribal, they were violent, they were an honor-driven society. So if you
and male-driven.
Exactly.
They're male-centric because
Exactly.
we were talking about very, very,
Right.
right?
So take the male-centric aspect of Bedouin society. When the Quran comes, when we read it today, it seems sort of misogynistic and sexist. But if you compare it to the Bedouin society, it made a lot of improvements, such as it gave women the right to divorce. It gave women the right to request the money that you get when you marry someone. So
Sure.
the male has
dowry.
to give the dowry, exactly. And it allowed the women to take half the dowry, so they could say, I'm going to marry you and I'm not going to accept your dowry now, but if you divorce me, you have to give me all of the dowry, and you can set it to whatever you want, right? And so that gave women a whole lot of more rights than they had.
So it was relative
Exactly.
power rather than absolute.
Exactly. And so the argument now that's coming in Islam that's trying to reform is saying we shouldn't take that, because the Quran was written for the Bedouin societies, it wasn't written for humanity, we should take the concept of incremental improvement that the Quran does, that the Quran embodies, and apply it to modern society. And so just like women today might have incremental differences between male and female, we should apply the same concept of improving those in the present society, and that's how they interpret those aspects of the Quran. And I mean that it's not 100% catched on, but it's a movement that's going on within it. And
that's what I'm asking for. Is because we're not hearing that. We have the drum beat.
Yeah.
There is the drum beat. So when you hear, when you see in the press, when you see in the news, the misinterpretations, both on both sides of the Quran and of Islam, how do you both deal with it and have that in your own learning and growth?
Well, I think there's a difference between attacking Islam as an idea and the people of Islam and Muslims. So when people say that they don't like the violent aspects of Islam, I don't interpret it as they think I'm violent and that I'm terrible. I mean, some people who say those things do mean those things, but a lot of times people don't like the idea that it represents, and for good reason, because if you interpret them literally, some of them, they are pretty bad, right?
Exactly.
And so it takes, I think, but you have to emphasize that difference, right? Because I think a lot of people, when they hear these criticisms of Islam, which might be valid, they think therefore all Muslims are violent or aggressive and that they need to be stopped. And so emphasizing the difference between attacking Muslims.
Donna's saying we have 3 more minutes, so now we get to solve the world in 3 minutes. All right, but continue on.
And so that's it,
So you're opening yourself then to both learning and growing, and to seeing how, and when you look out at the campus at the University of Texas, are you finding a lot of interest? Are people curious? Are they hopeful? Are there what's going on there?
There's a lot of, I think, there's a lot of hopelessness that people feel that there's certain problems that we can't solve, and that it's going to be just a matter of overpowering people to get our way. And I think when you understand how people work, certain things such as evil and hatred come from a place of ignorance and not from hatred or some insurpassable difference between people that can't be reconciled. And so I have a lot of hope for the future, and I try and share that with my peers, and I think just in conversations exactly like this, you reach that sort of hopefulness, because even if someone's as different as you can possibly imagine from you, you can still connect with them on a human basis and find those common similarities. And I think that
that's where I think that the common ground, because we both want. What I find when I talk with my friends and the people that are my acquaintances that I have, and when I really get down to it, we want the same things.
Exactly.
How we get there may be different, but
we're on the same team. We all want the same thing.
And we're all part of we're all part of this process, and I need to remind myself, and then remind by my actions. And I think this is our opportunity, because we've gone from a hierarchical to a nodal consciousness with the internet, with the opportunity for your cousin in Cairo to see this conversation tonight, were I to put it up and then put it up on the YouTube tonight. Now, how long would that have taken 20 years ago, 30 years ago, before they could have been, we had to ship a videotape and get it over there and to make sure, go through custom,
It's incredible potential. And I think if we use it correctly, it has the chance to change the world.
And the thing is that if we look at in the hierarchies, as we're talking about, fear is a baser emotion, and takes more lift for me to get from this the amygdala up to the anterior signaling.
Yeah,
It takes
absolutely.
lift in the same way that in physics, it takes lift
more
to lift
power.
up, right?
Exactly. It takes practice. It's just like you train your muscles. You have to train your mind in the gym of interpersonal relationships, and I think that's important that we should emphasize.
Hello world, it's me, Dennis. Thank you for watching another episode of Reasonably Spontaneous Conversation. I got a message today from our producer Donna Cosper and our sound engineer and editor Jonathan Wilson that the show was 3 minutes short. So they asked me to video something to fill that time. So I decided to go all historical and show you the roots of reasonably spontaneous conversation, which I began in Los Angeles on Theta Cable, public access, in 1978. Take a look. How would you introduce yourself? Would you help
Well,
me?
it depends on the context, of course.
All right, introduce you in the context of reasonably spontaneous conversation.
Where's my script? I think.
No matter how hard I plan it, I have a difficult time being spontaneous.
My sentiments exactly.
Exactly. So tell me, how would you describe yourself?
Well, presuming that everybody here has heard of me,
Yes.
that guys, of the kid, I would introduce myself as saying, "Hi, I'm the person you've heard of."
The
And
monkeys, right? I mean, primarily is your
Oh,
identification
the
through
primary,
there, right?
primary hell. This is it. That's it. There's just no. I mean, my public life began and ended with the monkeys, with a few little like subterranean flare-ups, like cable TV interview shows.
That's right.
And which won't be seen in my hometown because you don't carry. Theta does not go into Venice.
No, they did.
You dogs. I mean, not
Poor
you, the audience,
Venice.
but you, the establishmentarian here.
Sure. Well, it's just a question of laying a few pipe.
Of course it is, and why should they lay pipe before the marina has taken over Venice? I mean, afterwards it'll be much more lucrative.
So what? So you were playing as a monkey for a while and
Yeah.
had a lot of fun with
Playing
it.
and working.
A
And,
lot of fame.
Oh, yeah.
Was it a lot
The
of
most.
dreams realized for you?
No. A lot of conjectures were realized.
Yeah.
Not exactly.
What
dreams.
was realized for you? What was that time like for
What
you?
was realized? Well, I actually seem to have made and spent real money. Now that's a realization. You know, all that money as a realization. That's really something. It was very interesting because I thought, I'd heard all the stories, flash in the pan successes who make a lot of money and then they go down the tubes. I said, this isn't going to happen to me.
Not Peter Torp.
No, not me. But as a matter.
Well, that was bracing. Thanks again for joining us on Reasonably Spontaneous Conversation, and we look forward to seeing you every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on Austin Public Access.